I say Yasu. Thank you one and all for inviting me here tonight. It seems like a few short years ago, I was sitting at the audience waiting for somebody to speak. And I remember Andre, Gregory, where are you, Andre? He was, huh? There you go. You were very involved at that time, and I just wanted to get involved. I'll just give you some background. My two grandfathers came over from the other side in 1913, and they were looking for the streets paved with gold, like all of our ancestors. But it took me 100 years to find it. I found it. And they worked very, very hard. My father's father was from Nicetos, and I met a lot of the Syrians here, the Hellenic-American family. Thank you for coming. And it must have been maybe the water we drink in Nicetos, because we have a lot of the Syrians that were very successful. Some of them was Judge Nicholas Tsoukalos, and he was a great judge in New York, federal judge, and he did a great job. He just passed away about a year ago. My father came over. My father worked for the Italian government. He was watching a lighthouse. For 17 years, he worked at a lighthouse by himself with a few goats, working for the Italian government. And he would only go back to Nicetos maybe once every 3-4 months. And after World War II, Italy lost the war, by the way. The Brits, who were running politics in those days, took those Dodecanese islands, which Nicetos was part of them, gave them back to Greece, took them away from Italy. And that happened about March 7th, 1948. So the last time I was running for mayor, I convinced the Italians and the Columbus Club that I was born on September 7th. March 7th was still part of Italy. I said, I was conceived an Italian. I was born a Greek. I was conceived an Italian. Well, bottom line, I remember the Columbus Club. They got great food. Great food. My father married my mom back in Nicetos, and I was born. And the sad portion of that thing, I was born on September 7th, and my father took me over to see his mother and say, the new John Catsimatidis is born. And that was the name of her husband, who came in 1913. And that evening, she passed away.
Oh, wow.
So I always thought when it was my birthday, it was my father thinking about his mom that passed away.
Oh, wow.
Immigration in those days, his two brothers that were here had to sign that if my father didn't pay the rent, they would have to pay it. Not like what it is today, where it's just loose borders and just anybody comes and goes. And finally, Donald Trump, he's got his peculiarities, but he had the courage to stand up and says, enough is enough. Like I've said in all the television shows, radio shows, I am pro-immigration. I am an immigrant. But we have to control who's coming and going. And some of those diseases in some of the schools in California, you know where they came from? Some of the Central Americans that came in, went to schools with our American kids, and guess what? They got sick. So, pro-immigration, but we have to check who's coming and going. We just can't have. We lived on 135th Street, between Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue, by City College. And my father was paying $48 a month rent. And I met the Catsimatidis family here, and his uncle, Dino Rallis, even though he's Catsimatidis, but his last name, he decided to change his name to Rallis. He was my father's tenant. So my father was paying $48 a month rent, but Dino paid $7 a week. So my father did okay. My father, education, he worked 2 jobs. Education was very important to him. And I tell you all, and I tell all your kids, education is very important. The other thing that's important was I'm addressing mostly Greek Americans here, is you can grow up in Astoria, but don't ever forget about your kids. They are competing in the world market, not just the Astoria market. So you have to be successful all in New York, all the world, not just be the best person in Astoria. And I've tried to tell kids that all my life, and because it's important. I never Americanized my name. I made everybody else know how to pronounce it. So that's it. I went to school. I went to grammar school. I went to parochial school for a little while. I went to Brooklyn Tech. I saw a few Brooklyn Tech people there. Lou Katsos, you remember Brooklyn Tech, sir? And I'm prejudiced. How am I prejudiced? If there's an application on my desk and it came from Brooklyn Tech, most likely they're going to get hired. It was a good school, smart kids, and they worked hard. And then I had a congressional nomination for West Point. William Fitzryan, the congressman on the West Side. But I chose, my mother cried, my father yelled, I was an only child. So I ended up going to NYU. And I survived. Let me tell you something about the graduates of West Point. I would have graduated in 1970. You ready for this one? 70% of the kids that graduated, the second lieutenants, died in Vietnam.
Ooh.
That is a horrible number. 70%. One of them, he didn't graduate from West Point. Another one from Nicetos, lived across the street from me on 135th Street, the Mavrudi's family. He died in Vietnam. And I knew him. He was an Eagle Scout. He was a great American. He always went out to fight for his country. Unfortunately, one day, a bullet got to him. When I graduated, I was going to NYU, and I started working all of a sudden in a grocery store. And I go from extreme to extreme. I was going to take the summer off from working in a grocery store. My mother says, go to work. So I went to work, and I started in the grocery business while I was going to college. When I was a junior in college, I had 2 stores, and I didn't do well my senior year of college. I didn't graduate. But worked hard, and by the age of 24, I had about 10 stores. And 10 stores was making a lot of money. And what do you have to do? Leadership. In those 10 stores, you have to hire people, train them, talk to everybody, make sure everybody does their job. And I have a great expression in my office. People do what you inspect, not what you expect. And John McConville here runs our company, United Metro Energy, out of New York. I've said that many times.
100 times.
I heard it too.
And remember, people do what you inspect, not necessarily what you expect. I started in the supermarket business. I've realized that I should be in the real estate business, because if you don't control your real estate in New York, no matter how successful that supermarket is, no matter how successful, if you're in the restaurant business, that restaurant is, guess what? When the lease is up, you're out. So I started in 1977. The world was coming to an end. Real estate in New York, you could have bought it all for nothing. I did. I started buying real estate in New York City. I bought like at least one parcel a month. And over the next 3-4 years, I bought maybe 30 parcels. And I had a lot of, most of my mentors in those days, and it's very important, teach kids, teach your kids to have mentors. Somebody that's going to put an arm around them and say, this is the direction. Most of my mentors those days were Jewish. They were common sense, hard-working people. And that was all the people in the food industry. And that was all the people in the real estate industry. And I can name them, I think about them all the time, because they helped me a great deal. Margot will tell you, because she was around in those days. Margot started as my assistant in the office in 1973. She was 9 years old. and I had the woman and the man that invented Haagen-Dazs ice cream, Rose Mattis.
Yeah.
They were my mentors. They invented, they created. The word invented and create. I believe myself, I am a creator. I learned how to create things, not just going along with it. And I learned from a lot of these people. So by the end of the 1970s, I was in the supermarket business. I was in the real estate business because I kept buying. And I remember another mentor of mine, Irving Rosenbaum. Irving says to me, keep doing what you're doing. You're working hard. You're doing the right thing. One day, you'll blink your eyes, and you wake up, and you'll find out that you're doing very well. And it was very true. I blinked my eyes. I woke up in 1980, and all that real estate I bought for nickels and dimes. 600,000 here, 500,000 here, 200,000 here. It was worth over 100 million. That's a lot of money in 1980. I always had a dream of flying.
Wow.
I bought my first jet from Roy Disney. And I remember my first pilot, I still see him, it's still Jim Jacobs. And we used to fly to Atlantic City for training, back and forth. And I said, Jim, this is expensive. What do we do to offset some of these costs? I'm always thinking, how do you offset? I mean, I started going to Atlantic City. I sat down in the blackjack table, and I used to walk away. I think out of 300 times, I probably won 290 times. Once I made enough money for the fuel for the airplane, I left. And I said, Atlantic City used to bring in people from New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York, in limousines. We had meetings with the casinos in Atlantic City. I said, you're missing a big part of your audience. We started we convinced them, we'll bring in people from far away, as far away as 500 miles, to Atlantic City on a private jet, make them feel important. All these guys always felt important. My God, they sent a private jet for me, you know? And we did very well. Casinos did well. We built that company up to 48 jets. And I used to fly them all. And that was part of the life I remember. That was great. And that company became NetJets. And we sold it to Santulli. My pilot, Jim Jacobs, stayed with him. And then they sold it to Buffett for $800 million. And my pilot, I think his portion was $50 million. Not bad for a pilot, $50 million. Yeah, it was a lot of money in 1988. At the same time, people knew I loved airplanes. 1983, the airline business was in the ship. I ended up, Nelson Happy comes to see me, and he had invested his money into an airline called Capital Airline. And my Jewish friends were impressed because I got the exclusive rights to nonstop from New York to Tel Aviv. I was one of the first. Us and Tower Air at that time. And we ran that airline. We ran that airline for a year and a half. And finally, what happens? People's Express enters the market. They're flying to Miami for $49. They're flying to San Francisco for $99. I had a partner in that business. I said, I think it's time to sell. You know, you can't put enough fuel in the airplane for $99. Well, what was the bottom line? People's Express was the Enron of 1984, 85. It was all a fraud. They were cooking the books, and every time they needed money, they went back to the shareholders, they went back to Wall Street, and guess what? Wall Street gave more money to blow until it finally blew up. So we were in the supermarket business, the aviation business, the real estate business, and the people we sold Capital Airlines to, poof, bankruptcy. We go to recover our airplanes from the bankruptcy court, and the trustee was there. And the funny thing, and he had the oil company, and I now own, and I owned that oil company for 35 years. And he says, I got a deal for you. I'll give you the exclusive on this oil company, United Refining. They're in bankruptcy. You know when a French guy gives you an exclusive? You better check it twice. He worked for Bank Paribas. And I liked it. I was looking at the convenience stores, gas stations, there were like almost 350. And I said, I'll buy it. And I drew down on my credit line at Bankers Trust, which I had a big credit line backed up by real estate. And I bought the oil company. Chase Manhattan at that time was the lead lender. I said, Mr. Catsimatidis, what the heck do you know about running an oil company? I said, Mazola oil, Western oil. They didn't like that very much. So I come back every month I have to report to the creditors committee. So I come back a month later, and the standard operating procedure is, how much money did you make last month? And you're supposed to submit a financial statement. So I submitted the financial statement, I straightened out the company, and I says, how much did you make last month? He says, well, last month, it was a tough month, but we made $7.5 million.
Wow.
$7.5 million is a lot of money for 1 month. At that point, it's not about, should John run this company? how are you gonna pay us back $100 million? And we made a deal. We bought 100% of the company. You know why we bought 100% of the company? We were making so much money, we even paid them post-petition interest, which means the interest during the bankruptcy, we paid them anyway. So I ended up with 100% of the company. And on and on and on. But I don't want to just talk about what I'm going to talk about. You know, then we bought Pantry Pride supermarkets from Ron Perlman. We bought Prestige from the South Land Company. So I was on a buying spree. And it was fun, but I knew when to stop a little bit and make sure that everything was under control before going on to the next step. People ask me about all the businesses. I love the aviation business. I love the real estate business. Lately, we went into the construction of new buildings, which is a great business, you know, and my daughter and my son love it too. They want nothing to do with the business. And I said, my daughter and my son, I says, Dad, what do you want us to do? I said, I want you to build one of those 100-story buildings. So they got their head. I'm going to build a 100-story building. We just built Twin Towers on Coney Island. First time anybody ever did that. And we're going to start renting at the end of the next couple of months. But what it is all about is vision, creating new things, and having the courage to go forward. If you don't have courage and you don't have vision, it's a bad situation. You need it. You need both. And the other thing is, do it for success, not necessarily for anything else. Because whatever you create, if you're going to make sure that it's successful, the money will always be there. We even gave, when we bought Pantry Pride in Florida, we gave the money to Ron Perlman to buy Revlon. It was our money that we gave him for Pantry Pride that he ended up buying Revlon. And I was there during those adventures, and that was an adventurous acquisition. He was going up in 1986, $100 million. He raised the price $100 million every 3-4 days. $100 million every 3-4 days is a lot of money. Now, this is the days of billion-dollar deals and multi-billion-dollar deals. But in those days, it was interesting. But I don't want to talk all about what I want to talk about. I wanted to really open it up to questions to answer what you guys want to hear. And me, I'm willing to talk about anything. What would, I'm opening it up to questions. Now, let me tell you about Nina. Nina's been my friend forever.
Yeah.
Since we're 9 years old, just about.
Yeah.
People look at me now as a Republican. They look at Nina as a Republican. But me and Nina were Bill Clinton Democrats. I use the word Bill Clinton. Huh?
We're dethroned.
Yeah.
Democrats.
And it was an adventure. Bill Clinton was, both of us, was a good friend and a very smart guy. One of the smartest guys I ever found. I used to run dinners in, which hotel was it, Morgan? The Jefferson Hotel. 20 people, 25,000 apiece. A lot of money, 25,000 during 25 years ago. No Republicans and Democrats, nobody was ever disappointed. He would go into that room, take questions from all 20 people, and answer them in detail. And once he met you, he never forgot your name, right, Nina?
Right.
Nina, you had a question.
Yeah. I wanted to pick up something you said, which was you got an airline company and you straightened it out. Could you slow down and do that middle part? What did that mean? That's huge. I mean, straightened it out. What did that mean?
On the airline?
Yeah.
That means at the beginning, you end up at the end of the month with more money than you started at the beginning.
I'm glad I asked.
Now, I'll tell you one of those quick stories. We bought Pantry Pride from Rob Croman.
Yeah.
And there was 47 Pantry Pride stores and 8 Sun stores, S-U-N. The 8 Sun stores were doing, just 8 stores, $3 million a week. But it was costing $3,300,000 to do it. So it's not good when it's costing $3,300,000 and you're only doing $3 million. You lose $300,000 a week before you know it's serious money. And we straightened that out too. We converted those Sun stores to Pantry Prides. And all of a sudden, positive cash flow. But you have to make decisions.
But the airline business, let me just say, you kept the airplanes.
We kept the airplanes. We bought them. We went
So
back
the
to
airline.
bankruptcy court. We kept the airplanes, and we started the 3rd largest airline in Canada.
There you go, see? I'm just saying.
Simple. We kept the airplanes as collateral or something. Yeah. Questions? Yes.
Well,
Tell us your name and who you are.
I'm John Stratakis,
Yes.
and
Yes, sir.
yes. So, as a real estate developer and investor, any thoughts on the New York State's involvement in real estate, the New York State government's involvement in real estate, starting from Amazon, continuing with the rent regulation laws? And all
It was a horrible thing what happened with Amazon. Horrible. And I described it on my radio show. I do that radio show as a hobby. That there was 5 people involved, cost New York City $27 billion. And, you know, I can't say the pardon my language, I can't say the word shit on radio. But these 5 politicians, 2 of them being whatever, either they're dumber than dog shit, or they're lying to their constituents. Now, what does that mean? Ocasio says, that $3 billion, I'm going to put it elsewhere.
Yeah, it isn't there yet.
There is no $3 billion. After Amazon spends $27 billion to do business in the most expensive city in the world, one of them, we give them back a $3 billion rebate. But they spend the money first. After they spend the money, we got their $3 billion, then we give them back a rebate. So they're telling the consumers, I'm going to spend that $3 billion elsewhere. There was no $3 billion. So either they're dumber than dog shit, or they're lying to their constituents. Outright lie. I hope that answers your question. Next. You got me started. Yes, I see somebody.
Yanni.
Yanni, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You know, that seemed to be an outright lie, what happened in Long Island City, because it's too blatant for that not to be the case. But with the
You
trend,
think they're not dumber than dog shit.
I think dumber than dumb and dumb dog shit. But the trend here with politics and real estate, it seems like we're getting taxed to death in the tri-state area, and you know, from an income tax standpoint, what are we going to do with lead?
Don't forget, don't forget, me and Nina were Bill Clinton Democrats.
Yeah.
But he had common sense. He had common sense and was doing the right thing. Made a couple mistakes, but you know, kind of. What are you gonna do?
Where are the common sense Democrats in New York City?
Well, the problem is, okay, for those of you who don't know, Andrew Cuomo knows his stuff. And he had put together what they called reform state senators. 8 of them, I think. It was 8 of them. And they voted with the Republicans. So they used to have checks and balances. So the 8 Democrats, the reformed state Senate Democrats, voted with the Republicans, so you had a balance of power. When he's running for his 3rd term, state Senate Democrats and made it all regular Democrats. So now the Democratic Senate outvotes, I think there's, I forget the numbers, like 30 to 20 or something like that. But they outvote the Republican Senate, which was the checks and balances. You have the Assembly, that's purely Democratic. And you have the executive office of Andrew Cuomo, who has some common sense when he wants it. But it's all Democratic. So this New York City, I'll give you an example. There's no better way. I'll start this way, why people are moving out. 10, 15 years ago, 100,000 people in New York City, New York State, paid 50% of the taxes in New York. 50%. 100,000 people. So many of those moved out. Today, 50,000 people pay 100% of the taxes. Now, what happens when you chase them out? Because those 50,000 people, they have the capabilities of moving. They don't have to stay. They're smart enough to get up and move. They're smart enough to stay out of New York City for 185 days, whatever legal it is. Then you have nobody. So what are they depending on? They're depending on getting a Democratic Congress that when Illinois or New York is ready to go bankrupt, that the Congress is going to bail them out.
So why then
Do I own
invest in
any
New York real
municipal,
estate?
do I own any municipal bonds? No. And the only place that, how does that affect real estate? You think you own your real estate? You own your real estate as long as you pay the real estate taxes. 10 minutes after you don't pay the real estate taxes, you know who owns the real estate? The city or the state. And the source of money is, let's go raise real estate taxes. And that's the source of money. John Banks, who runs the real estate board of New York, a very smart guy, very good guy. Of all the political money that goes to New York City, New York State, the real estate industry, I think, is 62 cents out of every dollar, every political contribution. So they do have some influence. But then it's hard to beat the crazies. Ocasio should not have won. Okay? The Muslim lady in Michigan should not have won. She won. Now, it's either Michigan or Minnesota. I don't remember.
One in each.
One in each.
Palestinian,
Yeah, but let me tell you what it is. In one of those states, I forget which one it is.
Illinois from Minnesota.
If I'm a registered voter in Michigan or Minnesota, I forget which one it is. If I'm a registered voter and I go in to sign up to vote, I could vouch for 15 of my friends. And based on my vouching for those 15 friends, they can vote in the federal election. Hiya. That is crazy. But the law exists. Because I had breakfast with Mitch McConnell, the majority leader. The law exists. Even though it's a federal election, the states have control of who votes. So, are we going to have a problem in the future? I'm going to tell you who's going to have a problem. Everybody's heard of what's going on in Great Britain? Brexit. You know what the real problem is in Brexit? Does anybody know what the real problem is? The real problem is immigration. The Brits are tired of getting all these people into Great Britain, and they won't tell you that. And the newspapers will not tell you that. The television stations won't tell you that. But if that's a little better, you know the translation of that. They reached up to here and they said, the heck with it. I suggested, I was with Kissinger a couple of weeks ago, I said, why don't the Brits make a deal that they have their own currency already. Why don't you make a deal to control your borders and not allow everybody in. What Arafat once said about Europe, we will win and take over Europe, not with bullets, not with guns, not with missiles. We're going to win and take over Europe through our women's wombs.
Yes,
Because they move into France, they move into Germany. The Europeans are having 1.4 kids per family. The Muslims are having 14. So how many years is it going to take to outvote? Now, I'm not against Muslims. Now, there's a lot of them, great people. But America, my parents came to America. My grandparents came to America because they wanted to be American. I don't want people coming to America. I want people coming to America that want to work hard to become Americans, not to change America for what it is.
John,
Yes. Question?
from the Ganisa, Carpathos, or from Washington Heights.
Carpenter's a great island. I've been there.
Here's the question, going back to energy. In Pennsylvania, we have the Marcellus and the Utica, which is a huge moneymaker for the state and the state coffers.
Everybody's driving Cadillacs in that area. Across the border in New York State, 100 feet away,
There's
they're
nothing.
starving.
And by the way, now we have no natural gas. Con Edison had said the local distributor in Westchester County will not tie up any new natural gas pipes. We need it in New York State. Is there any way Cuomo's going to do anything to allow fracking?
Cuomo will never do it.
Okay. Thank you for the answer then.
He will never do it.
That was easy.
Thank God I'm in the oil business. No, but pipelines are very important to getting, whether it's gas or oil around. It's the safest way to get it around. But I don't think Cuomo will ever do it.
So neither pipelines nor fracking.
Yeah,
That's great for New York State then.
yeah. And they're going to close down Indian Point in 2021 or 2022.
2020, I think. They rolled it up.
I had a visit from the Prime Minister, the Minister of Quebec. They're willing to sell cheap hydro energy to New York, and they are meeting to substitute cheap electricity. It will save New York State $600 million a year instead of Indian Point. That's. I went to some of those meetings. It could happen. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, John Papadospanos. I'm a former recipient of the Pan-Hellenic Scholarship, so thanks so much for all that you do for that organization as well. Finance lawyer.
You can thank my wife, Margaret. Margaret.
Oh, that's a different.
My question is energy related as well. So a lot of what my group does is we finance refineries. Can you talk a little bit about the state of the industry, the refinery industry and the oil industry, and what future trends look like?
We just rebuilt a pipeline in Canada, connecting to our pipeline. We have a pipeline that goes from Seneca, New York, down to a refinery in Pennsylvania. And that one, the one in Canada connects into the Enbridge system. And we get a very cheap source of product. So the key for refining to make money is the source of where the product comes from and trying to keep it at a reasonable cost. The Philadelphia refineries are in, how do you say, deep doo-doo? Instead of, yeah, see, I can't say deep shit on the radio, so they taught me how to say deep doo-doo. John used to work with John McConnell. He used to work for one of them. And one of them, the rumor is going to close down by the end of the year.
Yes. PES, Philadelphia Energy Solutions, was the the old Sunoco refineries, right? To answer this gentleman's question, right? So Pennsylvania's sourcing all this LPGs and what have you. It's being piped down into Marcus Hook, an old refinery that they demolished. And they're exporting 700,000 barrels a week of propane to, you know, China, Japan, wherever the best netback is. But PES had a fire last night. Mr. Catsimatidis sent me the note, said, what's going on, watch your book. They're in trouble, right? They just recently in bankruptcy. They came out of bankruptcy. They're having significant problems. They just wiped out the executive board there. However, the state of domestic refining in the U.S., if you're on the East Coast, you're in trouble, right? So, you know, if you're not burning the light sweet crude, you're in big trouble, right? So PES is a heavy sour crude kind of plant. So they're sourcing stuff from, you know, Africa, Nigeria, what have you, and it costs a lot of money to bring that in, right? And then you back it up to see what happened with President Obama. He lifted the export ban, right? And as soon as that happened, you know, the U.S. is flooding the world market now with all our Gulf Coast refinery production. So the East Coast is starving, right? They're like, what do we do with our product? And then the West Coast is enjoying some of the cracks that John does in Warren, Pennsylvania, because they're burning the West Canadian Select. That spread will continue to widen, right, over TI. So, you know, if you're a Marathon, if you're a Buckeye, what do you want to do, right? You want to take that refinery production you have on the West Coast, and you want to bring it to the busiest harbor on the planet, and that happens to be New York Harbor, right? So they're really pushing hard on the old Buckeye system, the Laurel system, to bring those West Coast refinery barrels all the way down to the East Coast, right? So if that happens, you know, the East Coast is really going to suffer from a refinery company.
See, the other problem is that the new Attorney General from, and Governor of Michigan, which, you know, we were supporting the people from Dow Chemical there in Michigan, and lost. And they want to shut down one of the Enbridge pipelines. And it's horrible. They shut down that system. Jim Hansel from our office, Jim.
It's 500,000 barrels a day. It's been there for 60 years, crossing under some of the Great Lakes, 6 miles underwater. They're trying to shut it down within a month with no alternative in sight. Enbridge was going to build a $300 million tunnel to replace that pipeline to be incredibly safe. This new governor is campaigning against it with no realistic alternative.
It's a big problem under President Trump, which is, you know, pro-business. And, you know, people have to realize that people that are pro-business, if business people take money out of their pocket and invest it in the United States, the unemployment rate will be down the way it is now. It's down to what, 3.7, 3.8, whatever it is? But you need people to have confidence that they're not going to get screwed by the government on more regulations, et cetera, et cetera. That if they invest money, that they're going to have a return on investment. And right now, the United States, I think, is producing, you know, 12.5 million barrels a day. We never even dreamed about it.
1.2 million a year.
Huh?
1.2 million barrels a day, year over year,
Yeah.
increase in production.
And confidence in our government, confidence in the system that we're not going to do anything stupid to hurt business people. That's the problem with New York City, New York State right now. That you're investing money, but there's a lack of confidence if the state, at Albany, or the city council, they don't, you won't let some of these city councilmen running a candy store for you. They have no clue. The same thing with some of the assembly people. There's a lot of smart state senators and assembly people, a lot of smart ones. But the dumb ones that out yell, the smart ones, and they're timid and don't want to stand up, guess what? You know who's the losers? All of us, the taxpayers. So I'll give you one more statistic, which is interesting. Talk about Florida. There's 21 million people. These are estimates. 21 million people in Florida, 21 million people in New York City, New York State. In Florida, there is no income tax, zero. The budget for Florida, to run Florida, I think $89 billion. If you live in New York City, the budget of New York State and New York City is $265 billion. 21 million people, same amount of people. How do you get from 89 to 265? There's no common sense. God bless America. We'll survive.
Hi, John. Paul Lountzis.
Paul?
On the political side, how do you get Washington, nothing's getting done? So things like immigration, infrastructure, and healthcare. Why can't we get anything done in any of those very important areas?
Well, you know, Jerry Nadler called me the other day. And I was on the phone with him. You were there, I think. I was on the phone with him, how long? 45 minutes, 40 minutes? And I know Jerry for 40 years. I ran his campaign for borough president against David Dinkins in 1984. David Dickinson later on says to me, "Why did you run his campaign?" I said, "I had nothing to do," and he asked me. Which is a true story. And I said, "Jerry, back away. I know you had an argument with Trump 30 years ago, 35 years ago. You had an argument with Trump 35 years ago over those buildings on the railroad yards on the west side. But it's 30 years later. Forget about it. Move on." And I think I was starting to get across to him. It's time to move on, Jerry. Forget about impeaching the guy. It's just a headache. Take one or two more questions. I'll give everybody time to go to dinner. Yes, I see a hand.
George Patras. So you've been very successful in many sectors, and you're a great American success story. I say we salute you.
From Lysidos.
From Lysidos, of course. But if you would have kids entering high school right now, what advice would you give them? What sectors should they focus on? Where are the opportunities of the future?
First of all, you give them the speech about competing in the world, not competing in just their high school or just their small town. Then you tell them about, I think you try to teach them a little bit about socialism versus capitalism. That you work hard. This is the only country in the world where you work hard and you have the ability to make it. The other thing I did with my kids, by the way, because a lot of parents send their kids away to Michigan, to Ohio, or whatever. I told my two kids, you can go to school any place you want, as long as it's in Manhattan. and, you know, no matter how independent you think those kids are, you know what they depend on? A hug in the morning and a hug in the evening. And tell them you love them every day. And I think that's one of the most important things. Both my kids went to NYU Stern, and they both went to school in Manhattan. One of them, my son, went to St. David's, and the other, and went to Loyola, which is a Jesuit Catholic high school. And they got a great education. And, but being close to your kids and giving them a hug every day is better than sending them off to Michigan or sending them off to California or Florida, and you may never see them come back. My advice as a father. One more, anybody? Do I see a hand back there?
Yes, it is.
Yasu.
How are you? Can you give us your perspective of New York real estate scene right now as it stands right now? What
Yes.
we can expect in the next few years? Are we on the top? Are we?
I think you got room to go up. The New York City real estate, New York City is the capital of the world. Miami is the capital of South America. So the only two places I'm investing is New York and Florida. You invest any place else, you could have a problem. You got to watch the interest rates and not over leverage, because as long as you don't over leverage, you'll be able to survive. I had a great expression, and I use it in the office all the time, Effie, right? Business, sometimes, it's a sine wave. It goes up, goes down, up, and down. Now, when you're selling, try to do it on top of the sine wave. When you're buying, try to buy a little bit on the bottom of the sine wave. Because there'll always be a top, there'll always be a bottom. My son and my daughter run the investment department of our company, where they invest in bonds, equities, preferred shares, et cetera, et cetera. And I let them make mistakes. Why? Because the only way I learn is by making mistakes. The only way your kids will learn is to let them make a few mistakes, and they will learn. And the only thing I hope for, I hope they make a few mistakes now, and it's small amounts. You know? $1 million, you know, who cares? You know? But someday, when I'm not going to be around, and it's their turn, I want them to learn those lessons while I'm still here. And I will let them make mistakes. And that's the way they learn. Thank you so much, everybody. John, Effie Piper, Effie, Maria, Jim Hansel, Arthur, Roosevelt.
You got it right this time.
That's funny.